Mute off the microphones.
Yes, if you're not speaking, please do mute them off the microphones. It will be better for the sound. Okay.
Muriel, I think we're live.
Yes, so we are live. Hi, Yishai.
Hi.
How are you? We have
Yes,
other.
good. A bit of a feeling of a déjà vu, right?
Yes.
It's some
Second.
time since we did. Yeah.
Not that bad though. There are worse déjà vus.
Yeah.
So we have some volunteer facilitators today. Laurence, she's joining us from Quebec. Pedro, Gilberto, Denzil, Nuria from Barcelona, Pencho from Bulgaria. So many people from all around. And I'm just going to quickly briefly introduce the MOOC. The hands-on MOOC is about teacher training. It's about teacher training on ICT and how to include these tools into the classroom. So we will work following a learning design studio process, which is what Yishai will introduce us today. And then we'll work during 5 weeks designing a learning activity that uses an ICT tool. This will be based as it's a design process. It's iterative and it's empirical. So you're supposed to evaluate with the peers or colleagues or your children or friends. You're supposed to prototype before going to the classroom, and you also need to think on the end users who is going to use this learning activity that you're going to design. So today, Yishai Moore, he will introduce us the Learning Design Studio that he defined and devised, and how this has been set up for the hands-on MOOC. So I'll leave it up to you, and I'll just exit so that more people can join in. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Muriel, and thanks everybody for being here today. What I'll do is I'll share a presentation with you, and I think well, you can find the sorry. First of all, you can see the link over there. And or scan the QR code, and also Muriel will share the link later on if you didn't manage to catch it. So I'll go through this presentation quickly, just kind of give you an overview of what we mean by learning design and what is the Learning Design Studio. And then we'll quickly look at the actual implementation of this on Canvas, and hopefully have some time left for questions and answers. Right, so the first thing is, what do we mean by design? Right, and this is just a few quotes. So, Tim Brown, who's the head of IDEO Design Agency, it says, just one request, please. If you're in the session and you're not speaking, then press the mute button. If when you do want to speak, obviously remember to unmute yourself. Right, so design thinking is the idea of using designer sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically possible. That's Tim Brown from, and you can see the link there to a very nice paper on design thinking. But I actually like always to go back to Herbert Simon, one of the founders of AI and modern economy. It says, everyone designs or devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into desired ones. So really, a design, and the way I see it, is first and foremost about change, about making the world a better place. And that, for me, is that's what education is about, right? So, if you're in education and you're not trying to make the world a better place, maybe then, you should find your place somewhere else. But it also means that design is really very, it's sort of driven by an ethical position. It's always oriented to change, to create something new, something better. It has a creative aspect, but it also has a kind of a rigorous aspect. This is just a quick quote on education. Now that's from John Dewey, and when he talks about, when our schools truly become laboratories of knowledge making, there will be no need to discuss the place of science in education. So that's kind of a a vision of schools or education as John Dewey says, laboratories of knowledge making, and again that for me is also an ideal of what education is about and what sort of I'm aiming for when I talk about learning design or educational design. So as I said, education is about changing people's state of mind into desired ones, and so that brings us to the idea of learning design or design for learning as a particular approach to looking at educational practice. Now, about characterizing design a bit more, so it has a creative element. There's what we call empathy, and Tim Brown talks a lot about empathy, and other people talk about design thinking, talk about empathy in the sense of trying to understand, to get into the minds of someone there really should mute their microphone. Yeah, if Mira, maybe you can mute other people's microphone if they haven't noticed that they should be muting. So the idea about empathy is that your starting point is from understanding your users and their needs. And where they're coming from. It's responsive in the sense that you design something and then you look at its effect and you respond to the changes. It's not something that you kind of do and launch. But it's a sort of interactive process, and it's reflective. All these kind of build on Donald Schoon's idea of design. He calls it a reflective conversation with the materials of a situation. The idea is that there is a situation you want to change, and you'd want to change it by introducing some innovation, some new artifacts in that situation, but you don't really know what would be the effect of what you introduce into the situation. So that's why you're constantly in conversation. You put something out in the world and the world talks back to you. That's what you call the conversation element. So Donald Schoon again talks about design, on one hand as a mode of inquiry, trying to make sense of the world by kind of identifying some phenomena which you don't understand and engaging with it, and at the same time trying to change the world, to create new things which would respond to that situation in conditions of complexity and uncertainty. So that's kind of briefly, and there are other talks you can find on the web and so on. So we go into more depth into this notion of design, but combining the ideas of, on one hand, learning design, so education as design for learning. On the other hand, ideas from Schoon and others about design as a mode of inquiry. That sort of led me to develop the framework that I call design inquiry of learning. And this framework is, it's a kind of a sort of a general approach, but it's also implemented in the format of the Learning Design Studio. So the idea about this framework is that you really go through a cycle. As an educational practitioner, you go through a cycle where you start by imagining some change that you want to bring about, some educational challenge that you want to address. You investigate that challenge in terms of understanding the context, understanding the people that are involved, their desires, their constraints, their relationships. You look for inspiration by reviewing examples of what other people have done, both in terms of scientific research and in terms of practical projects. And then you go through a process of ideation and prototyping. So you create something from your ideas, and you evaluate that. And since this is usually, like in the case of this MOOC, it's a 5-week process. Obviously, you can't really do sort of full-scale evaluation, but you try to find evaluation methods which are modest and realistic with respect to the constraints that you work under. Finally, it's very important to stop and reflect, and not just reflect alone, but reflect with peers and colleagues, and try to understand what happened in this cycle, what have you learned, what surprised you, what happened as you expected or not as you expected, and from that kind of derive some directions for the future. So again, as I said, the imagine phase is defining the educational challenge, investigating, meaning analyzing the context, refining the challenge, identifying pedagogical approaches. Inspire, that's looking for examples that you can refer to from either theory or practice. Ideation is a kind of creative process of conceptualizing a solution. Prototyping is creating a quick implementation to test your ideas. Evaluating, so putting that prototype to a test and observing to see if it really matches your expectations and meets your objectives. And finally, reflecting is to produce an account of your design process and share it with others and discuss it. Okay, that's kind of the whole process. The idea why we call it Learning Design Studio, that's kind of borrowed from other design disciplines. So if you think about architecture or product design and so on, there is this sort of format of a studio where, as you see, students work on a project. They have regular meetings when they meet, and they share they present their work to peers. They get feedback both from peers and from experts. The role of the teacher is really more the guide and facilitator, asking questions, pointing students to new opportunities, or pointing out the weaknesses in their work. But eventually, the work is really, and the learning process is fully owned by the learner, by the student. And that's, again, that's a principle that's behind the structure of the Learning Design Studio. So the Learning Design Studio is a format that's been used in, sorry, I should actually add, this slide. This presentation was prepared for the first run of the hands-on ICT MOOC, so I should add this first pilot of the hands-on ICT MOOC to this. These are various courses where the Learning Design Studio format has been used. So several master's courses in universities, and the Open Learning Design Studio MOOC. And now this is the second time that we use this format for the hands-on ICT MOOC. If we look through the process of the Learning Design Studio, we start by what we call a Dream Bazaar, which corresponds to the Imagine phase. That's where people express their dreams, the kind of the fantasy of what they would like to do, what change they would like to bring about in the context in which they work. Then optionally form teams. If people find that they share interest, they can decide to work on the project as teams. But again, in a short MOOC, usually it's very hard to work in teams. It's much easier to work individually and just give feedback to one another. The investigate phase is where so for instance, we'll create personas and perhaps create forest maps or other representations of the context. The context. Connect phase is where we look at examples of what other people have done and connect them to our challenge and to our context, and see how from there we get to we can conceptualize a solution. There we use a storyboard as a representation of an imagined sort of a projected scenario of an activity which addresses the challenge that we came up. And as I said, we prototype. There's optional phase of curating existing resources to support the prototype. Finally, evaluation and reflection, as we saw in the previous slide. So yeah, sort of already went through all of these, and so just one thing that we will be using the ILD, and I know that you've had a presentation on the ILD last week. If you have any questions on the ILDE, then you can also ask them today. And that's the end of this presentation, right? So I'll switch off the presentation now and pause for a minute if there's any questions on this really general overview. Any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This last part, the ILDE.
Yes.
I haven't heard about this.
Okay, so the ILDE is an integrated learning design environment. Perhaps, I think, let's see if it'll be useful to go back to that slide. Yes. So like I said, I believe that there was a session last week with Davinia from University Pompeu Fabra, who is developing the ILDE. So I think I won't go into too much detail, but you can, we could also share the link to that presentation later, and you can go and look at it. So the learning design, integrated learning design environment is an environment that's been developed by University Pompeu Fabra as part of the European project METIS project. And the idea is that it supports this whole process of design inquiry. So we will be using, I mean, it's been used for quite a few other projects, and you can, I'm sure that Davina mentioned those in her talk, but we used it in the previous round, in the previous pilot, and we'll be using it again. As I said, the Learning Design Studio is really based on students developing, or learners developing their own project and going through a set of exercises, and each exercise they produce something and share it. The ILD is an environment where they will share the different objects that they produce. So for instance, if I mention in brief the Dream Bazaar, where you say, okay, this is the dream, this is the way I'd like to change the world. The way you do it is by creating a page in the ILD and then sharing it with others, and others can comment on it or note the connections with their dreams and so on. Likewise, when we get to the phase of defining personas, then you can use a persona template from the ILD. And then further on, when we get to the detailed design of learning activities, we have some specialized tools for designing learning activities also included in the ILD. I suggest that if you haven't done so, that you register on the ILDE as soon as possible. And sorry, is this the first time that you hear about Learning Design Studio? So there's a question for all the people here. If if it's the first time that you hear about the Learning Design Studio approach, and if you've had a chance to look at the ILDE since the session when it was presented. Yeah, so Nuria, I know you. I remember that you came to the first MOOC and then had to leave. But I have other people. Um, so and then he said that he heard it mentioned in the previous session, so he's explored it a bit. So this is obviously. Uh, Definitely for some of you, and obviously for the participants in the MOOC, this will be a very new approach, I assume, for a lot of people. Very different than a lot of other experiences or sort of educational or professional development experiences they've seen, and definitely if you've participated in any MOOC. Most MOOCs take a much more traditional view to professional development. So I think that that part of the difficulties that people would have definitely in the first week is kind of coming to terms with the Learn Design Studio approach, both in terms of the the basic, the underlying ideas, and in terms of the pedagogy, which is, like I said, much more based on a studio model than sort of frontal lecturing as or more passive methodologies that you might know from other places. So perhaps if do we have any more questions at this point? Okay, so perhaps what we should do now is have a look at the way this is implemented in the Canvas. Now, just to kind of get a rough idea, how many of you have already looked at the Canvas? Yeah, we should have it's a pity we don't have a kind of a voting tool here just to get a sense. But anyway, so this round of the hands-on ICT MOOC is being run on a platform called Canvas, and this is the way. If you just enter the course, this is what you see. Just a general overview, an introduction, and that image we just saw of the design inquiry of learning model. And as we see here, the emphasis on collaborative work in small groups, a focus on the Learning Design Studio approach, and so on, things we already mentioned. Let's have a look at the first week. So I'm looking at the module. So first week, and so the first is the first activity would be an introduction session, introduction hangout, right? And then the next activity is setting up a Design Studio journal. And this is something that, and actually this activity is where you're asked to, or the learners or participants are asked to register on the ILDE. By the way, the link here is not the right link because we won't be, as far as I know, we're not registering on this sort of the base. Okay, no, the link is okay. It's the link to hands-on. So, that's, let's see. So I'll log out here, just so you see, okay, and then if I haven't registered, I need to register, and then I log in, and well, you can see here there are some LDSs which I've already created in the past, so I won't get into these, but the first activity says that you use this template to create your learning design journal. So you see that's the advantage of the ILD, that you can we can create various templates, and then once you click on the template, it immediately creates a document with that particular format which you can use, and this is what we'll use in the course for I mean, this is what participants would use in order to maintain a journal of their activities through the MOOC. Now, what we would like you to ask you to do as facilitators is really take, perhaps even this week, or between now and Friday when we have our next session, go into Canvas, look at these activities of the first week and try to walk through them. So for instance, if we said the first activity that we have is to set up a design studio journal, then set up your own journal. And that would, first of all, help you when somebody comes to you with a question about how to do this. Obviously, it's easier if you've done it yourself, and it also sets an example. So when learners, the participants come in, and they want to have an idea what is a design studio journal, then they can look at your design studio journal as an example that would help them understand how to create and manage their own design studio journal. Right. The next activity is, as we said, the Dream Bazaar. And again, if you haven't registered, then we ask you to register and use another template which we have for the Dream Bazaar. Now, this text. So at the moment, we don't yet have an actual template for a Dream Bazaar. We have a document which you can duplicate, but hopefully by the time that we actually launch the MOOC, when the MOOC goes live, we will have a template just like the one we had for the Learning Design Studio. For the journal, we'll have a template for Dream Bazaar, right? So the process will be easier. But in cases where we don't have templates, and we can create ad hoc templates by just creating a document and then telling people to use the duplicate this button to create their own copy of it. So there you see how we can go through these various activities where we ask participants to create something and share it, and also and then once they share it and they we recommend that they assign a license to it, and maybe even if they choose make it public. And they can then, whether they make it public or not, they can they can receive comments from their peers. One thing that's really important is to encourage participants to tag their project, the outputs, the resources they create, because if you think about, we'll have close to 1,000 or maybe even over 1,000 participants. If you want to find contributions from other participants which interest you, it's very hard to navigate this space, and that's where tags are very helpful. So if you tag things as, say, my project is about mathematics for early years children, right? So if I tag it mathematics early years, somebody else with similar interest will be able to find it. And then we go into the activities which are about analyzing the context. So we look into the different, and there's a text here. I won't obviously go into the whole text here, but there's an explanation about what we mean in terms of the context, what are the different sort of dimensions of context, and then we ask participants to create what we call a factors and concerns document. So and then here's also, okay, this is also where we get into personas, I believe, but it's not completely clear here, so we might need to tweak it a bit. Oh, I see where it's actually we actually create personas in week 2. So this is just the kind of the first broad description of the context, and then we have a convergence session, and then we go deeper into the context by creating personas in the second week. So I think I'll actually stop here because I think it's probably quite a lot to take in, and I'll stop here and see if we have some more questions at this point. Oh, so there are some comments, some corrections. Sorry, Mira corrects me. For the learning, for the journal, we won't be using the ILD. Instead, we'll use the portfolio tool from Canvas. So that's integrated in the actual environment where we run the MOOC. And if you don't have access to Canvas yet, then you should send an email to community@handsoниct.eu. The instance of ILD which I showed you is the one we used for the previous round. So we haven't set up actually the ILD for this MOOC yet, but nevertheless, you're welcome to come in and to have a kind of go and play around with the current version of ILD just to get a sense of it. Is there so the question, is there a version for each local language, Nuri asked? Do you mean a version of ILD for each language or of Canvas? Nuria? So, so the text, well, the whole translation aspect of the MOOC is something that the project team has been working on, and I think they'll probably send you more details on that later. So, or I don't know, Mireia or Muriel, if you want to respond on that. So we have a delay with the other participants. Not sure I understand. Is there any expectation for the journal? Lawrence asked. So really the expectation in terms of the journal is that you give an honest account of your experience. That's all there is. But hello, Muriel?
I was going to answer the language question.
Okay, so I'll let you answer that, and then I'll get back to the expectations in terms of the journal, yeah?
Okay, great, thanks. So we will all be working in the same environment. The idea is that it's the same MOOC for everyone, and we are all sharing within different communities. So all participants need to know a little bit of English, because all the materials and surveys will be in English, and the environment and interfaces as well. But then participants can produce and contribute with their own language. So we have 7 languages in parallel, and these will be separated in groups. Okay, so no separation within different courses or communities, but we are all going to be all together, and you can choose the language with which the one you contribute and you participate. I hope it's clear. Yishai, I'm gonna let it back to you.
Thank you for that clarification. Um, so now I see that some people are asking, they're in the facility. Katian says she's in the facilitators group in Canvas, but not in the MOOC in Canvas. Elitisa says she logged into the platform but can't see anything yet. Um, are the activities, and again, Muria, I think you'll have to answer this, are the activities already visible to the facilitators, or are they just visible to the team at this point?
Isai,
Yes.
can you hear me? I
Yes.
don't think that the activities are visible. We can only see the facilitators group. We can see the group of facilitators that
Yes.
Carlos created. The activities are not visible, I think, at this point.
Okay, yeah, that's so. I guess they're still being edited, so that's why they haven't been exposed yet. So I think we'll probably finish editing the activities for the first week pretty soon, and if not, then just have comments in there saying, okay, this bit will change. But I think it's important that the facilitators have access to at least the activities for the first week as soon as possible. So we'll press on with that and just let you know by email when or through the group once they are available. So I'll get back to the question about Lawrence's question about the journals. As I said, you can obviously write as much or as little as you feel comfortable with. There's, maybe some people, write a few pages every day, and some write a few paragraphs every week. It really differs. But what's I think the importance of this is, first of all, for you as a way to structure your reflection about your experiences and to have a record of this experience that you can go back to towards the end of the MOOC or even after it. And of course, it's also a way of sharing those experiences with your peers and then noticing that, oh, actually the same problems that you have, other people have, or somebody say no to something interesting that you haven't thought of but could be relevant for you as well. So there's, it's pretty free form because it's a record of a personal experience, but we encourage you, and through you encourage the participants to use it as much as possible. Any more questions about the journal? Okay. Any other questions about the? So as I said, you should be given access to the activities fairly soon, at least the first week activities. But from the brief kind of run through that we did now, are there any questions about the Dream Bazaar, the idea of analyzing the context, and so on? Okay. So, okay. So since most of you are not okay, perhaps we can go through the people who are in the session now, and quickly, just if you can introduce yourselves and say what's your motivation for participating in as a facilitator in this MOOC. What are your expectations, and perhaps if there's something that you're worried about or concerned about or unsure about and you'd like to raise at this point. Okay, so shall we start? So Kathy-Ann, do you want to start?
Okay, I will start. My name is Kathy Ann Daniel Gittins. I'm an instructional designer with the University of Central Florida. I also do a lot of teacher training with the Organization of American States online. And so my interest is in the learning design cycle approach to teacher training and online integration of tools into teacher training, because I'm hoping that what I learn in this course will help me with the other work that I do.
Thank you. So actually, I hope we can also learn from you because, as you say, you have a lot of experience in teacher training, and it would be interesting for me at least to hear your reflections and how what you do here is similar, how it differs from other approaches that you're familiar with.
Okay,
Thank
sure,
you.
no problem.
And something that you're worried about or concerned about when you approach this?
One of the things I'm concerned about is I will admit to being a type A personality. I like everything lined up. So it's a new situation. I'm learning as I go along. So for me, it's challenging. The kind of fluidity of the situation is a little bit challenging for me.
Yes, and I have to say you'll probably need to deal with a lot of fluidity and uncertainty because, this sort of project-based, learner-centered approach that we take here. Things never quite work as planned.
It's a
All right.
learning experience. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so who wants to go next? Laurence, maybe you want to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so my name is Laurence. I was a teacher and a pedagogical advisor. Now I'm a graduate student in e-learning technologies. I'm really excited about the MOOC because I really want to know exactly how it works, not as a teacher but as a facilitator, and how to help people going through LMS project and all the different aspects, because a MOOC can be really different from one to another. So I never been a student in the MOOC, so it's a first step for me and a huge step because I'm going to help teachers how to get through their project. So yes, that's the thing. I've got a concern because that's my first project. So I want to master all the techniques and I want to make sure that I'm going to help them. So I want to understand all the aspects so far. Yeah.
Yes, and I think, you'll find that, the first week that people enter a MOOC like this, they have to, well, there's a kind of a triple challenge for them. There's the technology, which is new, there's the pedagogy, which is new, and then there's the content itself. So the problem is that a lot of time before we actually reach the content, we have to deal with these two first obstacles. And I think for you, the more you're familiar with the three aspects, the technology, the pedagogy, and the content, the more you'll be able to help the participants. And that's why the sooner you get into so the minute that you've given access to Canvas, I encourage you to really go through there, and anything that's not 100% clear, flag it. It might be that we have a bug and we need to clarify things. So, never assume that it's you that aren't understanding. It's us that we didn't explain well enough, right? So with all of these elements, just go in as soon as you can and start asking us questions on anything that isn't clear. Okay, so who wants to go next?
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay. My expectations is that I've been involved in MOOCs before, always as a student, and I haven't been able to finish any of them. So I hope as a facilitator, I'll be more engaged and ready to go till the end. And then I'm interested in the subject as I am a lecturer at the Open University of Catalonia, and we follow similar methodology for creating the courses and supporting the student. And also because I'm preparing some courses in design thinking and user-centered design, and similar parts of the process are familiar from what you have explained before. And then because the final objective of the MOOC, that is changing education and students' experience in the schools. And we know the potential of ICT, but why is not entering into the schools, no? And maybe it's because we need training and support teachers in doing so. So more or less.
Thank you. And again, I think we can all benefit from your perspective when you say that you've been dealing with design thinking in other courses that you've taught. So again, if you can see the parallels between what you're doing here and what you've done or experienced in other situations, bring that to the MOOC, share those experiences and those insights with us, and we'll all benefit from that. Okay, so perhaps Dimitra, do you want to go now?
Hello again. I'm a teacher and a researcher. I'm highly interested in ICT education. I was a facilitator in the previous MOOC, and it was a very interesting experience. Therefore, I decided to participate in the third MOOC as well. Thank you.
And so from your experience in the previous MOOC, what do you see as what's your advice to the facilitators here? What do you think would be their biggest challenge?
I think that participants will ask them several questions regarding technical problems or the context of the activities, but I think that overall the most important thing is to encourage the participants to carry on, and this is, I think, the most important role of a facilitator, and I think it's quite challenging to participate in a MOOC like this one.
Yes, so there's, I think, there's the kind of the personal or social aspect of just, sustaining their participation throughout the MOOC, and that's something that, you need to, I mean, one of the things that I remember was the Greek participant in the previous round is there was a strong sense of community, and that's, in terms of the content of the MOOC, it's shared across all the different languages, but in terms of building up the community, the supportive community that keeps people going, that's really where your effect is most noticeable, working with the different languages and different geographical locations.
Yes.
So yes,
I think that by creating a Greek forum was very important because the participants were able to exchange ideas in their own language, and they felt like being part of a community, and they were more encouraged and more active, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then building on that, that's why this time we'll have different forums or other channels for the different community or different language-based communities. So Jyoti, do you want to please present yourself? Jyoti? No, we can't hear you. I'm afraid not. Do you want? Well, do you want to try again? No. So maybe while you try to solve that technical issue, Victor, do you want to introduce yourself? Victor? Okay, so it looks, and Letizia, perhaps you want to introduce yourself? Santi? Anybody? Okay, seems like...
I think I can do it. You hear me?
Now we hear you, yes. Good.
We have terrible conditions, weather conditions here, so it wasn't possible to log in. And we didn't have electricity, neither internet. That's why I was waiting to find a way to communicate with you. So I'm Xanthi, I'm from Greece, from a small island named Zakynthos. I'm a teacher trainer and a primary school head teacher. And this is my first MOOC, but I've been working as a trainer the last 10 years. Mostly in e-learning. And now I'm looking forward to cooperate and collaborate with all of you.
Thank you. And what do you see as your kind of challenge or concern, and anything that you're sort of worried about or uncertain about when you prepare to facilitate this MOOC?
For me, the most important part is the reflective way that we exchange ideas, materials, methodologies, everything. This is magic for me. And as far as we live, we still learn new things. That's why I want to be a participant and a teacher at the same time. And it's a big challenge for me to proceed something like this with all of you.
Okay, thank you. So, Diti, if you can try again to talk, or if not, just write a few words and I'll read it out. I think we can hear you now. Can you speak? No, I'm getting some noise, but I can't really make out any words. So, I'm afraid we can't hear you. So if you can just write, just write in the chat and I'll read out what you write. So GT from Montreal, native from Mauritius. So I understand you're helping facilitate the French version, right?